Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train a Dragon podcast. I'm your host HC, and with me are.
Rush 2112.
Wolf.
Wolfie-Dragon.
And today we have another guest, a new one to the Berkcast. Good sir.
Twigman.
Yep. After creating the drinking game with Rush, and we can ask him all the questions. So I'll start. How did you not die with playing that drinking game?
We Twig sort of gave up.
Hey,
Hey, I had one more beer than you.
look, because my beer's higher quality.
I had one of your beers, and then I ran out because I already drank them all. Just saying.
Well, on a serious note, though, the topic of today's episode. Do you guys know how sometimes when a new trailer on the announcement for anything comes out, and people, this is like, oh great, it's going the fan fiction route and stuff like that. Well, How to Train a Dragon is obviously no exception. So today we're going to talk about how fan fictions impact the canon How to Train a Dragon canon. So before we start, let's just give our quick positions on fan fictions. What do we feel about them? Do we read them, write them, all of that kind of stuff? Twig, you're the new guest. Why won't you start?
Crikey, put me in the spotlight.
That's what I'm always doing to guests.
By the way, Twig is British, not Australian. Just in case you got confused with the crikey.
Yeah, we can start with that. Long live the Queen.
Does the Queen write fan fiction, though? That's the real question.
Yes,
Ah,
she does.
there you go. There you go.
So
The
we
Queen
know
of
that
England.
show,
That's fine.
the crown,
Fiction.
obviously.
Anyway, so
Okay,
Twig, your stance on, other than the Queen, your stance on.
So
fan
what is
fiction
the
general?
what does the Queen think about How to Train a Dragon fan fiction? That's
Well, I hope she doesn't read my stuff. I read a lot. I read way too much. But I don't know. I've done a fair bit of writing recently. It's far too much. Something I do far too much in my life.
Okay, but overall, would you say you enjoy it, or you don't like it, or
If
What-
it's well written, then I love it. Just one of my major criticisms really is, it's not. I'm sure it's something not many people can help, but spelling and grammar is my only real criticism.
Okay, fair enough.
As somebody who has put my one chapter of fan fiction through the Twig strainer, I can say that is very true.
He shouldn't read my Valka fan fiction with that code that we're talking about, because we read it on the show. That's still. But yeah, Wolfie, where do you stand?
Sorry, what was the question? Couldn't hear you.
Just where do you stand on
Yeah,
fan fiction?
yeah.
The top
How
of the
I
stick, yeah, the
write,
writing.
not as much. I write not as much as I should, because I still have a bunch of unfinished stories. But I also read, though also not as much as I used to. But I enjoy fan fiction, and I think it's a great and important part of fandom.
Okay. Wolf, what about you?
Well, obviously, anyone who writes fan fiction is terrible because fan fiction itself is terrible, as we all know. So, getting that out of the way right now. No, I enjoy fan fiction. Right, it's a fun side thing that we get on stuff we like, right? Like I've wrote it myself. I've only wrote one or actually two How to Train Your Dragon things, one that's never been released, and I've wrote other stuff for other shows, but that's been about it. And I enjoy reading it a lot. I'm very picky about what I read, if you haven't figured it out yet. But so I don't read a lot, but I do tend to read some stuff, and what I have read has been really good so far. So no complaints from me.
Rush, you go.
For me, I would like to write. I have started like 3, never finished. 2 for How to Train Your Dragon. Do I read them? Yes, way too much. And of course, there's a little kid outside my window being very loud. For those listening, you will, if this continues to happen, you will hear a lot more stuff. AC died upstairs, so I have the window open, and yeah. So if I can hear him, you can probably hear him through my mic, barely. Anyway, and do I hate them? I hate how much I enjoy them. Pretty much. Excuse me.
Well, didn't expect that answer. Well, my turn. I am not against fan fictions, not at all, and I used to write a lot. I used to read a lot of them. I kind of stopped because I don't have the time. Unless I say a friend posted something, then I give it a go. But I'm not against the idea. I know where some of the hatred comes from. I just think that a lot of fanfictions can ways. Them are good, but the ones that are surprisingly decent. That's my 2 cents on it. Okay, now that everyone knows where we're standing, what do you think causes people to call fan fiction when they see something the official or canonical when it's announced? Let's say the Light Fury.
I think it's that in every fandom there are certain tropes that are very common in that fandom, and there's also, so for example, for How to Train Your Dragon, it's the Light Fury. Like a lot of fan fictions, especially like new writers, they start with a Light Fury story. Mm-hmm. But it's also common in other fandoms. For example, Harry Potter has the infamous My Immortal story. And when the screenplay came out for the Harry Potter theater play, The Cursed Child, it was very similar in some ways to that story. So it immediately got compared to it and got
You know what's funny? I haven't read My Immortal, but I was about to bring up Cursed Child later in this episode. So there you go.
I think it's that basically fans recognize something they're used to in their fan space, and then they don't expect it to see it really outside of the fan space, and then there's a sort of disconnect, a sort of unease, I think, that causes them to say, this is like fan fiction.
Okay. Wow, what do you guys think? Anyone has anything to add to this?
Well,
I can.
You can go to it. You're the guest of honor.
Am I? Oh. I can second Wolfie's bit about new writers going for common tropes. A fic I'm currently working on that I've been on since 2015 initially had a Light Fury in. Mm-hmm. So she was since written out a couple of years back, but hey, here we are with How to Train Your Dragon 3 and a Light Fury. So do I get to copyright strike Dean or
go for it?
You know something interesting. You guys say that you saw like a Light Fury as a common fanfiction trend. I just saw other Night Furies, like well, maybe it was called a Day Fury, not a Light Fury. But I get what you mean. It is a trend that's going on.
Yeah, there were a lot of different names for it, like Day Fury or White Fury. But basically, like a girlfriend, a new OC for Toothless.
I think that a lot of it is so when people call things fan fiction, it's either because they saw something similar in fan fiction, or it's so uncharacteristic of the show slash movie or what they think is the norm, which we can I can get on that later, but basically it's just I think that's why they would call it that, just because it's either something away from what they think is the norm or something that they may have seen. And on that note, it's the longer a show goes on, the harder it is to become original, just because more things get written. Now I can also go on that later, but
Wolf, what do you have to say on this?
Hey, first off, let's stop being nice, right? It's bad writing. It's meant as an insult, right? When people come out to say something, this reminds me of fan fiction. Well,
I guess segue.
It's meant as an insult, right?
Yeah.
You are kind of jumping ahead.
Bad writing. I feel like this is a part of the same thing, though. But whatever.
Okay.
I know. I was too, but I for once I actually tried to stay on script.
Bah, HC script. Bah.
You're late. You're off script. Did we switch roles?
I'm never late, right?
We have 4 witnesses.
Yeah. I'm sorry, buddy, but he's right.
No, I'm never late.
Anyway,
I'm always on time.
He's a wizard. He's never late. He arrives when he wants.
He's Chuck Norris. He's not late. He just had something to do before the recording.
This is true.
Anyway, so
but it's
anyway. Wolfie's Chuck Norris is a fan fiction. Go.
There you go. Ideas, reasons why people consider fan fiction bad. Number 1. But I mean, that's where it comes from, right? It's generally meant as an insult, and when people say it, more often than not, very rarely do I think it's actually meant to be a kind thing for a show to say this, right? It can be, but I think more often than not, people say it because they mean it as, I expect better from you. This feels like fan fiction. This feels like lesser quality writing from you as a professional than what I get from potentially non-professionals, right? The problem, I think, though, and something I think, that you have to ask, especially nowadays, is, right, you get such, back in the day, old man Wolf here to tell you, back in the day, fan fiction was bad. Fan fiction was very bad.
You say you're old. Have you been in the Sonic the Hedgehog community? This is. I can tell you horror stories, man.
Have you seen
I have
FF.net when it first arrived?
It's not a Berkcast if HC doesn't mention Sonic fan community.
Like I said, I have PTSD from this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from early FF.net.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're both old. We get it.
Early FF.net was bad. All right,
Hicktooth is young.
It's just that simple. I'm older than Hicktooth, by the way. Yeah, but anyways,
Hicktooth is younger than all of us.
He's got the whole FF.net on a hard drive. He can show us the bad original one.
Well, there you go. But I mean, like, that's where the idea comes from, right? Is that when fanfiction was first becoming a thing on the internet, a lot of it was just not great, just really not great. But nowadays you do get, a lot, I guess you say a lot more hits, all right? Like, a lot of people have learned, a lot of people have gotten better. You have new people coming in who have this focus on quality because they know in order to get any kind of views whatsoever, they're going to have to step up their game from the get-go in order to even get noticed now, because there's so much there that reading someone new's work who's not very good, you're not going to get a lot of attention, right? So nowadays, I think the question to ask, right, is it still considered an insult to call something fan fiction necessarily when you have fan fiction out there that is extremely good, some of which has been made into movies, whether it deserved it or not?
No, ironically enough, the ones made into movies kind of suck. But
Yeah, that's why I said whether they deserve it or not.
Anyway, before we officially move on to the next category, I'll just say that, like you guys said, usually when a trend seems to be lurking around the fanfiction area, whether it be a love interest for Toothless or something, yeah, people will call fanfiction on it. But at the same time, there are also other trends that people are just like, all the what if scenarios, like what happened if Hiccup missed, or what happened, or what would have happened if this happened, and what did people call that what if episode of Race to the Edge? The fanfiction episode. And what else did I want to say? I had a point and I lost it, damn it.
You're welcome.
Quality content at the Berkcast.
Yeah. Yeah, this does happen, sadly.
Yeah, it happens to.
But yeah,
all of us.
I remembered. Like, whenever something is considered too out of left field for a franchise, like, let's say, in the case of How to Train a Dragon, for example, let's say all of a sudden we reveal that, I don't know, it took place in the Shrek universe this entire time. People will call fanfiction on it. Like, and I will be right there with them. Like, how do these two things connect even?
Well, see,
Aside
there's,
from the...
there's a difference between completely ridiculous like that. Sorry, Shrek is not love, Shrek is not life. But and then there's also the things like, say, I don't know, God, what was the criticism? Was it season 4 or season 5 that everybody complained about, saying it was the fanfiction season? I can't even remember.
Maybe 5.
But
maybe 5.
Yeah, and that one was honestly, it's been so long since I've rewatched season 5 that I can't.
You know
remember
something?
but
Let's have
You
another
know
drink.
something? I think people said
Like
that
where you're
about
going.
Vigo surviving. Like, Vigo surviving was kind of a, oh really? There was a rock there.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's a pushing the suspension of belief at least. Well, as opposed to saying, oh, it's in the Shrek universe. Like, there's different levels of, oh, this is fan fiction, because just saying it's in the Shrek universe that's where I think everybody drops off. Well, saying there's a rock there, that doesn't
Like, I can
lose everybody.
I can just imagine imagine if this is the big twist of the hidden world. Then
What are you doing in my hidden world?
The hidden
no,
world
and
is
imagine,
Shrek Swamp.
like, imagine all of us who are planning to go to that Berlin meetup, and then this happens. I can just see all of us getting up and going in simultaneous, like at the same time. Nope, and leave the theater, and never look back.
Find the nearest pub.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and then we go drink our souls away.
We're gonna do that
okay.
anyway because How to Train Your Dragon is over. But regardless,
True.
yes. So where I was going is that, I mean, okay, I have no idea where we are in the script, by the way, but
Okay, you know what? Let's quickly
Yeah.
transition into, people. Do you think people call stuff fan fiction is a criticism, and do you think it's warranted? Wolf pretty much said what he has
Yeah.
to say on the matter.
Yes,
and he's
and
absolutely he's.
I think it's often a shorthand for it. I think it depends on who's saying it's fan fiction. If it's an outsider from someone who is not a fanfic writer themselves or not really in fandom, it's often, I think, a short, it's just a substitute for unprofessional or bad. Like, I saw the other day, they released these new stills from the upcoming Teen Titans live action show, and it looks kind of cheap,
Oh.
and like a lot of I was looking at the tweets about it, and a very common remark about it was that it looked like cosplay, like bad cosplay. And I think that's kind of the same thing as when people say something is like fan fiction. It's just like, oh, this is fan made, it's low budget, it's not a lot of effort put into it, it's unprofessional.
Okay.
That's when I think if it's an insider in the fandom saying it's fan fiction, it's it's more like specific about the tropes, I think. Like, oh, this is something that I'm seeing all the time in these fan stories, this light fury stuff. Or, oh, this is exactly like my immortal.
Okay. Twig, what do you think?
I think it's almost like a stereotype. You, as said, you call something fan fiction. It's bad, but give it a few years and that might disappear. Really. Not too.
Okay. If I may go for a second here, I think most of the time when I see somebody call someone something fan fiction, in regards especially to How to Train a Dragon, it is usually meant as a criticism. Is it warranted? Not maybe if it's done like, you know what? I'll say it's warranted if a fan fiction did it better than what the canon did, because because it could happen. I'm not saying this is going to happen with the Hidden World, not by a long shot.
What are you talking about? Your fanfic was obviously better already with the Light Fury. So
the Shrek one.
No, not the Shrek one. There was another character whose name starts with S who made a cameo at the end, but it's not Shrek.
Episode 10 of the Berkcast, if you really must know.
Go back to episode 10, talk to me later. And didn't call me after you read that. But anyway, if the fanfiction does end up being better than something canonical that did this, I can say that the criticism is warranted. But judging before you see anything just based on a trend, I think it's kind of jumping into conclusions too quickly. Like you can't, because there are good fan fiction out there, so it's not just it reminds me of a fan fiction, so it's bad. But at the same time, I can kind of see where people are coming from, because like you said, this is something I'm supposed to pay money for. This is something I'm, for all intents and purposes, purchasing. So you expect something a bit above something that somebody came up with, an idea somebody came up with in their room and posted on the internet. Warranted, not all the time, at least not before you see the final product, but it can go both ways.
Yeah, that actually, you did bring up a good point. Like for Hidden World, people are already calling it like a fan fiction and they haven't even seen the final product. And I can't remember who said it, but basically if it's written well, we have Steven Spielberg crying at the end of the script. Maybe it's just because it was so bad, who knows? But I invested money into this.
The ultimate advertising.
Better yet. He sends in another note. Oops, sorry, I read that fan fiction instead. Here's a bunch of notes. Good luck.
This is the guy who basically directed Schindler's List gets to cry at an animated movie. But like, so you get this feeling that that's unwarranted. You haven't seen the final product. Sure, the concept may be like a fan fiction, but there's also the point, at that point, do you think it's a criticism of it, or it's, I've seen this before in fan fiction? I think it's that case. So it's not always a criticism. I feel like sometimes you say, it seems like a fan fiction just because it's stuff that's not, related to the story, or something that I haven't found as the new norm, going back to what I said earlier, because people get this idea, this is how it should be, or this is what I want it to be. And, it is a very rare case, but there are a few people who call it fan fiction when it's completely unwarranted because they think this is how it should be. Not as this is what their norm is too, but
actually,
excuse me.
I finish. I'll go later.
Okay, but regardless, like, so as I was saying with the season 5, people watch it and call it the fan fiction, but I don't think necessarily all of it was bad. Some of the criticisms were basically, this is probably, but what if he survived within the season 4 finale? Like, with that long gap we had between 4 and 5, there was probably fan fictions of what if Vigo survived. And so of course you're going to have oh, it's like a fan fiction. And then there's also the criticism of, well, why was there a rock there? There could have just been like, how did he survive? Blah blah blah. And those are warranted. But obviously, for unfinished products, like HC said, unwarranted, in my opinion, at least as a criticism.
Anyone else want to say something on this before I give another example I thought about sharing?
Go ahead.
Okay, so how many people in this call are familiar with Sly Cooper?
Sorry, could you say that again?
How many people in this call are familiar with Sly Cooper?
Yeah, a bit.
No idea.
Well, so basically, just the basic thing you need to know for this, there were 3 games on the PlayStation 2, and then people started the third game kind of ended on a cliffhanger-ish. They pointed out that there might be time travel in the future. That's all, but other than that, the entire thing was pretty much closed down. And for years, people wrote fan fictions that revolve around the characters going back in time because the developer hinted at this, so that's all good. But and most of those fan fictions were called Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. Now, 8 years after the third game, a fourth game comes out, not from the same developer, and guess what it's called? Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. No joke. And to add insult to injury, the developers say all the time in interviews, we're big fans of this franchise. Like, we love the original trilogy. We are big fans. So everyone is just like, oh, it's fan fiction because they are fans. No, this is a fan fiction criticism I do not get. Just because fans are working on something official doesn't make it fan fiction, in my opinion. What do you think?
When you don't go into an industry to do something you don't enjoy,
Exactly.
You wouldn't go into an industry such as working on Sly Cooper without liking it.
Depends, but I'd say if you're making money off it and making it commercial, then you're not a fan anymore, of not at least not acting like a fan. You're making canon stuff. It's different than writing your own fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I think, right, the difference, you're still technically a fan. It is still technically fan fiction because, if you just look at the straight definition of fan fiction, it's fiction written by a fan, right?
Wow, I could have never guessed that.
Yeah. So, it's very much as long as you're writing fiction and you're a fan of the thing you're writing fiction for, technically you're still writing fan fiction. If they were fans of Sly Cooper and they're writing a Sly Cooper story, which Sly Cooper's is fiction, then technically they're writing fan fiction, right? If you want to be that pedantic about things.
Wolf, I'm going to out pedantic you. What is the definition of fiction?
Oh, yeah.
That hasn't happened. So when it does happen, it's no longer fan fiction, it's fan nonfiction.
Fanon fiction.
Fan fiction, there you go.
But I think the biggest difference between someone who's writing something that is fan fiction and someone who's writing something is the point of the fact that they're getting paid to do that job, right? You're not. You're doing it for fun or because you love something. They're doing it, because they might love it and for fun as well, but they're also getting paid on top of that. So there is a level of quality that is expected from that, with the fact that that money is now involved, right? The fact that the second money gets involved, the second a job gets involved, a level of quality is expected that wasn't there before. Fan fiction, you can look at and say, well, it may not be the best written, it may not have the best grammar or English, or they might misspell words, but that's okay because this isn't a professional piece of work. This is something someone did in their off time for free, for fun. So there's a lot of things that can be forgiven, right?
Okay, I'll just ask you this. Let's say after Hidden World comes out, wait 3 to 4 years or something, and How to Train Your Dragon gets rebooted, or that Rescue Riders show actually becomes real. and the people working on whatever it's going to be are saying, we are big fans of How to Train a Dragon. Would that justify calling it fan fiction? Just the fact that there are fans who are now working on something that's canonical? In your eyes?
I mean, again, if you want to be pedantic, yeah, sure. But in general, no, I would say this is, thing they've got paid to do. This is, whether it's canon or not necessarily, this is a professional thing. So I take this as non fan fiction. This is something I expect a level of quality from, depending on like even if it's like, hey, this is meant for kids, so expect it to be for kids, right? I still expect a level of quality there that I wouldn't necessarily expect from a fanfic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on to the next point. Was there ever a case you reacted to something as fan fiction, even though it was an official product? What was it? It doesn't have to be How to Train a Dragon, but was there a point you yourself caught something fan fiction as a criticism? Twig, do you have something?
In particular, it raced to the edge. It's not, well, or really anything not considered. I say not considered, not made by the original studio or maker, I would consider a fanfic.
So any kind of spin-off that doesn't have the original creators.
Yeah, in essence, because it is. I consider them fans for working on it, and it's yet again it's fiction, so logic gives you fan fiction. Bit of a short answer, but that's my take on it.
Okay, Wolfie, what about you?
I mentioned Cursed Child already from Harry Potter. But,
Yeah.
I think also raised to the edge, though, for different reasons than Twig. Because I'd say I felt that it was official. It was made by like people who like had resources. Like it was all official with a big budget and the old voice actors and everything. But I felt like it was not really the original creator's vision, sort of. It was different. It was more like an alternate universe thing, sort of. But so that was what made me call it fan fiction, because to me it felt like it just isn't the original universe. It's an alternate thing where the characters act differently and are in a different situation on the edge.
Okay, fair enough. If I may just continue this trend a bit, because looking back at it, not to say that I didn't like it, because I actually think the writers of the show did a very good job handling that twist. But when you really think about it, isn't Johan being the villain who was pulling the strings all this time is kind of a fan fiction plot?
I think I called it that when I heard about it.
Yeah,
Like,
but it
I
hasn't.
had as
It's
well.
probably. But the thing is, like before fan fictions were even a thing, that was probably a story, like an actual novel idea. So, do you think that would you say it's a fan fiction if it was actually written down as a novel first or something like that?
not necessarily. Okay, I'll tell you this much. Considering you said novel, if let's say this was a twist that was present in the original How to Train a Dragon books by Cressida Cowell, if it was something that happened there and they adapted it into the show, different story.
Then people would say plagiarism.
Then no.
But
I know, just kidding.
But in this specific case, because you had this character that, for all intents and purposes, 6 to 7 seasons has been your comic relief. Was this guy who we always needed to save, always made fun of and everything, and then all of a sudden he's this badass villain that was controlling the entire thing from the shadows. It's like, yeah, it's something that happens, but at the same time, I can see how people will look at this and say, well, that's a thing. That's
yeah.
I guess I am trying to say by fanfiction, I mean, it's kind of random. Like,
Yeah. I think what you mean is that it felt very much like they're deviating from their own storyline, like they're making an alternate character interpretation of their own character. So all of a sudden,
Which again, I do want to point out that I like Johan as a villain, and I like what the runners did with it. But at first glance, and considering some of the stuff that probably happened behind the scenes, the show getting renewed and everything, some signs of fan fiction are popping out to me personally. But that's just me. And Wolfie already mentioned Girl's Child. I have to agree on that one as well. At least something. At least half of it, like the entire part with apparently Voldemort had a kid. That part is ridiculous.
yeah.
Okay, Rush Wolf, what do you think on the matter?
Remind me to tell you something after the show because holy crap, I just thought of something really funny. Anyway, but it's not safe for Berkcast, NSFB. But I forgot the question because I was laughing at my own joke.
Personal cases.
Talking about
got something
personal-
fancy.
Oh yes,
Quality
personal
Berkcast.
cases. I usually don't at first. Like when I watch something, I watch first to enjoy it, and then I go to critical mode. Because I feel it's not a nice way to live if you just watch it and then immediately go to critical mode. That being said, that's why Twig and I did the drinking. No, it worked really well. It worked so
The drink
well, I
made it easier.
forgot episodes 9 through 13.
Should we restart Race the Ed from the beginning?
Oh yeah,
Oh.
Beer.
one per week.
Man.
But yeah,
No, if you do it all in 1 week.
it's actually not that I forgot. It's just that everything started to become a blur. I was sure there was a wildebeest in there, but I wasn't sure if there was.
Rip my
It's
presentation.
like, whoa. Oh, good times. But when I went back and watched it, because I kind of had to for the Berkcast, I started to realize it's like, okay, well, now that this has happened, it's kind of weird, X, Y, and Z happening. But it never really occurred to me to call it a fan fiction. It was more like, this just doesn't seem like the normal. So I never outright called anything a fan fiction, not even in like in that being said, I've always been like How to Train a Dragon was the first fandom I was in. Then now I'm in Steven Universe a little bit, but like ever since I stopped watching TV regularly, I kind of didn't get into that. Let's see, the Miraculous Ladybug. That one
That's not
it's just disappointing altogether. But
That
it's
fandom is
kind
a
of hard to
train wreck.
call it fan fiction because let's just put it this way: there are fan fictions that are better than all of their episodes, but that one's more of a kid show. Than
There's just no canon anymore.
yeah,
There's
there's
nothing
really. So
beyond the basic premise.
I mean, honestly, any Akuma that they make, you could say it's a fan fiction because somebody's probably had that idea.
Mr. Pigeon.
Just make a colorful character, give it a random name about their trait, and good luck. But yeah, those are like the only two major fandoms I've been a part of, as far as I can remember. And so it's not like I never really thought about calling something a fan fiction before. It was more just I didn't like that, I did like that, or it was weird off character, whatnot. So.
Okay. So, did anyone say something about this? Wolf, did you have anything to say on it? Or...
I'm very much in a similar boat to Rush. Generally, I tend to, like, I can separate that critical aspect for I'm just watching this for fun because I think this will be enjoyable. And so generally I can take myself out of the critique, right? Or out of the criticisms I might have against something and just kind of sit there and enjoy it and not see it as something that it might actually be or might not be. Have I called anything in particular fan fiction before or looked at it in that way? TV shows and movies, I don't remember if I have, to be honest. Not anything major. Games, though. Games, I can immediately say Kingdom Hearts, without a doubt.
Oh
Yeah.
god.
Yeah, this is pretty much fan fiction, the game, for all intents and purposes.
And I'm completely fine with that. Right, but
I'm
I
not,
mean,
but it's also one of those pretentious fan fictions who are written by this one guy who thinks he's recreating the Bible. And
yeah.
dude, I'm so confused right now.
Yeah, he's just lost the plot a long time ago with time travel and all
That's
that.
It's
that
like,
makes it the best part, though. Again,
Yeah.
that's what sells it. All right.
like these creatures have no heart. Oh wait, I lied. They actually do. Eh.
And yeah, like there's so much you could talk about in that alone, but I mean, getting back to what the topic of our show, yeah, it's definitely something I've called fan fiction before, and I definitely see it that way. And I don't think there's, and again, I think that, and that's not meant, and for me, anyways, it's not meant as an insult or a criticism of its storytelling, but it's meant as I enjoy it because it's that, because it's very much, I feel that it's almost not serious, that it's ridiculous in and of its nature, that I have to see it as that, because it makes it more enjoyable for me personally to do so. So again, it comes back to that. Just because it is doesn't necessarily mean it's an insult or a criticism of what something is, right?
Kind of think
Okay.
it depends who you ask.
Well, yeah, this is
Or-
true too.
Yeah,
A lot,
obviously.
a lot of people I know who aren't in any, they're not in any fandom. They don't write. They don't do anything really like we do. If you ask them what a fan fiction was, they'd tell you, oh, it's some 8 to 13-year-old who can't spell with nothing else to do.
This is true.
Um,
I was one of those people at one point.
Wow, you were 8
So-
to 10 years old writing a fan fiction?
No, I was someone who called other people who wrote fan and figured that's what it was, right?
So that they would obviously see it as an insult to call something fan fiction. Whereas we wouldn't, us less so, because we consume, we write, da da da.
It's it comes back, like you're saying, it comes back to that we've involved ourselves in that part of the fandom as well as that part of, I guess you'd say, the culture of the internet, right? For by and large, for many people who aren't involved in that, fan fiction is still that thing that's really, really bad, right? That it still has that stigma to it. I thought fan fiction was still terrible up until after watching the first movie came out. I'd still never read fan fiction before. After the first movie came out, that's when I decided I'm going to dip my toe in this and hopefully I find something good. And luckily I did, right? But I mean, that's when I did, that was my first attempt at dipping my toe into it. And even then I was very trepidatious about it because of the fact that it's fan fiction. It has that stigma to it, right? You expect to find stuff that's just really, really, really bad.
Yeah, there's a reason I don't tell anyone in real life that I write.
And again, it comes back to, is that an okay stigma to have now, considering like there's some, again, like in my opinion, there's some definitely professional quality work that comes out of fan fiction sometimes.
If
Yeah,
that's the
there's
only-
this
Sorry, you go.
there's this old rule by a science fiction author that Sturgeon's law that says 90% of everything is crap, basically. And I think that's true for like a lot of things, but with fan fiction is that the 90% that's crap isn't filtered out before publishing. It's just put in the same list on the same pile as the good stuff, basically. Well, if you go into into an actual publisher's office with My Immortal, you'd be laughed out of the bank. Unless you're
Just laughed out.
unless you're meeting with J.K. Rowling, apparently. But I think it's more that just with fan fiction, the worst examples become the representative ones in popular, like in perception, I think, which isn't really what's happening with other things.
Yeah, that is kind of a good point, that usually the bad stuff is more well known than the good stuff, which is probably because it's easier to make fun of, but at the same time, it is kind of a shame that the actual good stuff is being ignored when you think about it.
Yeah, it's also that I think at least until a couple years ago, it's less so now, you had this cringe culture stuff where you had like blogs and YouTube channels and stuff that would purposefully search out bad fanfic and bad fan art and just basically make fun of it.
Well,
Either.
there's actually a show on YouTube that's called Bad Fanfiction Theater, where where the host actually reads fanfiction in like an overly dramatic voice, like that's outright intended to mock, and let's not cut around the bush.
Cringe culture.
Yeah,
at
like,
its
yeah,
finest,
I
the
would like-
Berkcast. I mean,
Well, we do it because keep in mind that pretty much all the fan fictions we read so far are from us. So at the same time, we are making fun of fan fiction, but at the same time, we are making fun of ourselves,
I'm
not
dabbing
other
right
people
now. You
who
just
like
can't
it.
see it.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Yeah.
Although, look forward to when we read the Twigs fiction sometime.
Let's not.
Sometime in the future.
That noise of just regret there.
I'm not dead inside.
Not yet, anyway.
But you will be. There you go.
Okay, let's act like this. If we will ever do this, you will be with us. We won't do this behind your back.
Rush, I don't believe him.
Oh no, it's much better to hear your reaction in real time. That's how the Berkcast does it. We make fun of you in front of your face.
Right.
Even if you can see it. But anyway, going back on topic though, do you think if we didn't have fanfiction these days, people would complain as much as they do now?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm personally not sure. Like, if fanfictions weren't a thing, people will probably won't necessarily be all that critical on stuff like, let's say, the Light Fury or Vigo Surviving, because that what you get is what you get, and you need to accept that. But that's what I think.
I'm not sure because I have trouble picturing what fandom or anything like that would look like without fan fiction, because I think basically people would invent it immediately, but also you'd get other things, like you'd get more speculation about what the coming movie will look like. So you get more theories, and I think people would then complain, "Oh, it looks too much. This Light Fury stuff is just exactly what this person theorized." I think you'd get the same complaints, but just with a different terminology.
Yeah.
Okay, good point. Okay, so for the sake of, let's say we live in a world with no internet. Okay, for imagine.
Okay, you're off the Berkcast because there's no internet. This podcast doesn't exist.
Ash, it's one thing to make jokes that are just as bad as mine, but make sure they make sense, please. I
There's
said
no
in a
internet.
different.
You can't reprimand me.
For the love of. Okay. No fanfictions, no theory videos, none of the things that can be seen as predicting what the canon will do. Okay, let's go with this.
So
everything's just gonna get seen by
let me
time,
see if there's a comparison. Let's say we are in the 1800s waiting for the next book in a series.
This was actually
Okay.
a common thing, that books were written serially and published in magazines.
So there you go.
I think
get a
that
chapter a week or something.
I actually think it's still something that's going on.
Right. Anyway,
There's a rhythm trivia.
that actually is really interesting. But so okay, skipping that guy route of saying, oh, fan fictions will always exist, you can't have them, right? You can't not have them, etc., etc. I think like what Wolfie said is pretty on the nose. They would say the same exact thing, just in a different language, in the sense that they would just basically complain about it in a different way. People like to complain. That's just the facts of life. they
It's like
will
human nature to complain about something.
exactly.
You've got nothing to complain about in England. You've got the weather.
Right. So I think people like they would complain just as much. They would just use different words for it.
Yeah, I think people always complain about tropes and stuff. For example, in ancient Greece, you had the old plays, and often in those plays you'd have a Deus ex machina at the end, which was where a literal actor playing a god would be lifted onto the stage by an actual crane, the machine, and then the god would solve the problem at hand with magic, and everything was fine, and we'd have a happy ending. And it was such an overused trope that there were playwrights that started to like use the crane and then lift another playwright onto the stage, who then just writes a good ending on stage. So I think that was basically that time's over complaint about an overused trope, or the same way we say, "Oh, this light fury is so overused."
Okay, fair point. Okay, the reason I ask this though is, do you guys? I'm pretty sure you guys know about this because have you all seen Lion King 2?
I have
No.
not.
Are you serious, or is it just for a joke?
I have actually not seen it.
Oh,
Not seen it.
I've seen it. So you have someone with at least a bit of a frame of reference.
We're probably the worst
okay.
guests you could have picked for this.
Well, here's the thing. You don't really get what I'm saying. But anyway, Lion King 2 was 1999, I think. Yeah, it makes sense. It was around 1999. At this point in time, the internet was around, but it wasn't as big as it is now. So fan fiction didn't necessarily start yet, for all we know. And at the time it was released, most people call it one of the best, if not the best, of the Disney direct-to-video sequels. Something I can
Is that a compliment?
Yes.
Well,
Is that like
yes.
the best of the very worst?
Yeah, no,
It's a compliment / insult all in the same one, technically, I guess you would say.
Wait.
Okay.
Frozen
like they're
2
calling
gets
it a
the
fan
same thing.
fiction.
Well, just to comment on what Wolfie said, though, people usually say that this is one of the better ones, not just because it's better than the other sequels, because it actually has some merit to it. But anyway, so yeah, this was the basic consequences surrounding that movie when it came out. Now years have gone by, and fan fiction started to pop out and everything. And people have started to say, you know something, this plot is very fan fiction-y in a sense. So I started thinking though, if How to Train Your Dragon was like a 2D animated movie released in the 90s with none of this fan fiction stuff, if people would have commented the same way, because there you go, we had a movie that back then wasn't regarded as such, but now when the trend got some momentum, people start referring to it as such. That's why I'm asking this. So maybe Wolfie has a point, and people will just find other ways to call stuff like this out. But I don't know.
Fanfiction is almost a natural byproduct of being in a fandom. Some people will draw, some will write, others will just sit there and take whatever you give them. But if there's no fan fiction, then there's going to be something else they'll complain about.
But yeah, you say some people just take it. I think that at the time this movie came out, people were just like, yeah, we kind of have to take it because that's the only way we can see more of these characters. We can't go somewhere where people just write possible future storylines for these characters because that thing doesn't exist.
It's so easy now to write. Just open your laptop up, open a Word document and write. You don't want mounds of paper and crossings out and, oh no, that's another bad plot line, I'll start again.
But
Like,
again,
I think
people
you know,
could
that's
have
the
done
biggest
this.
thing.
But go ahead, Wolf.
Like you still have people who do that even without the internet, right? Like get a group of people in a room and to get them to watch a thing and then ask them to talk about it, right? They'll do a lot of the same stuff you see people do on the internet now. They'll come up with ideas on the spot. They'll start sharing in those ideas and getting engaged with that idea, and they're creating fan fiction there on the spot, even if they're not necessarily writing something. That room has already agreed that this fanfic would be really good or really interesting, and they would love to see it, but it's not what they got, right? So they continue to talk about what it was they got and what their thoughts on that were. You
Yeah.
can, you said earlier that it's human nature to complain about stuff. Well, it's human nature to wonder what if, right? To ask, I wonder what it would be like if this happened, or if this happened, or if this didn't happen. It's who we are. I think you're always going to have that be a thing, and it's always going to be there regardless of whether or not the internet exists or not. The internet just exacerbates that idea because it's so much easier to share those ideas.
Is the bells broken in the background, Wolfie? Because they've been going for
Yeah,
quite
it
a long
does that.
time.
Just
Quite a long
Signaling
time.
the end of the
minutes.
episode.
it does that at 6 o'clock.
The time has come for a Berkcast fanfic.
No.
And of course now
Yeah.
and of course now when I need a dramatic bell, it doesn't ring.
Good someone say
Thanks,
Berkcast fanfic? I'll recreate Leffy Slayer of fans.
You know something? If it's going to be like that, no, don't do that, please. Anyway, so okay. Here's a random question: how do you think people behind the official product are supposed to treat fan fictions? Like, what do you think Din the Bra would do if he read some How to Train Dragon fan fictions?
Cry.
Yep. Into his beer.
I think creators have to be careful to keep canon and fanon separate in general, because at least in like fandoms like Voltron or Steven Universe, you get this mess that creators starts liking tweets from fans or like saying some fics are good and some are bad, and then the fans start to use this as conjecture to start like guessing what is really canon and what is not. Like, oh, this voice actor likes a tweet about this ship. It must mean that ship is gonna become canon.
Oh, I'm talking about Jeremy Shana.
Yeah, and Bex, but my point is mostly that I think creators need to be careful to basically they can appreciate fandom and engage with fandom, but they need to make it clear that fandom and canon are separate, distinct things.
Actually, I'm not entirely sure about this. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Disney outright forbids directors to read fan fictions of their own work. Like, I think Rich Moore, the director of Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia, said that he can't read any Wreck-It Ralph or Zootopia fan fictions.
Yeah, that's a writer thing. Basically, it's a right thing, because if the writer might have read something and then writes an episode or a movie that's very similar to it, to a fanfic, then the author of that fanfic could potentially sue
Yeah, it's
if
for
they can
legal
show that
reasons.
the writer may have used their fic as inspiration.
But since they're once you make a fan fiction, you're some open license. It instantly falls under some open license. Doesn't that make you ineligible for suing?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does as well, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the attempt can still be made.
There's a lot of issues.
know.
Well, for one, okay, it depends on where you are and the copyright laws, and
This
where
is
it's being
true.
used. Blah blah blah, legal stuff. There's fair use, which like you can take a tiny, like obviously, hey, Light Fury, you can argue, oh, the Day Fury from HC, they just stole that, but then you can say, okay,
Hold
that's not
on,
really.
I didn't create a Day Fury. I ask you. I'm not taking responsibility for this thing.
Well, you're not suing them, so it doesn't matter anyway. But and then there could be restrictions on the website where you publish it. So it all depends as well where you publish it. There could be disclaimers. Hey, when you publish a fan fiction here, this is open for anybody to use. And I believe actually a lot of websites for fan fiction do post that, mainly so people who say use the same idea or say they like the idea but they want to write it better or something, they can't have it taken down saying, hey, they copied my idea, that's copyright, or take it down. So a lot of the fanfiction websites do have that stipulation, but it's all on where you post it.
Yeah, it also depends on like if it's commercial. If like for example, I wrote a Voltron fan fiction about one of the characters there, Pitch, and she went through something, and part of that, like the next season, some characterization of that happened actually in the show. But if the entire plot has happened, and then I start to wonder, hey, did they read my fic and then just use it for profits? Then that's questionable, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like they're just another fan making an AU of my AU or something. It's them actually profiting from my ideas.
Well, but then go ahead and prove that they actually read your fanfiction. That's another thing.
Yeah, that's the hard part. That's why writers can't often have to refuse to even look into any fan fiction to avoid that sense of it might have happened.
Yeah. Also, if a story's going somewhere, let's say the first film is going somewhere, and then someone writes a fan fiction but gets it right, then it's almost a moot point.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense. So if someone wrote a fan fiction before How to Train Your Dragon 2 landed, and Volker survived.
Yeah, I can
think
say
it's more than about could you convince a judge that it's really so unique and so precisely your idea and not just a generic idea that anyone could have come up with.
Exactly, it wouldn't hold up in court.
Yeah, okay.
Also,
This is
because I don't think a lot of judges are really old and not sympathetic to fan fiction? Question mark. It's like, yes.
Get off my lawn.
You know something that's actually I would actually want to see like a fan fiction writer take like one the creators of the Thinking Water fan fiction to court just to see how this would actually go about.
You don't. You really don't. And the biggest reason why you don't is because the second someone does that, right? The second someone does that, you immediately set laws and precedents into action. And at that point, you give someone an inordinate amount of power to basically say, yeah, all this stuff that exists now is no longer allowed to exist because one person lost a court case now. Like, that's kind of where fanfiction sits. It sits in that legal gray area of this is okay, but technically you're still using someone else's work to make your own work. And everyone kind of says, yeah, we're all just going to be okay with this existing because if companies tried to do something against it, that's not going to be great. And then if a fan tries to do something against a company, then that's also not going to be great for everyone else involved as well. So it's very much both sides existing, but never interacting closely in any major way, because the second they do, it kind of opens up basically the conversation you've had here, which is a can of worms that kind of just goes all over the place. Mm-hmm. And no one wants to pick up that mess. So let's just not bother.
Okay, so just to pretty much to close discussion, what do you think makes an idea better for a fan fiction but not an official outing? Like, let's say The Light Fury. Why do you think people accept it more as a fan fiction idea rather than something that's canonical?
I think the simple, quickest answer is because it's something it's an easy idea to use, right? It's something that like I expect you as the original creator, as the quote unquote professional, right? I expect you to come up with something that surprises me. This doesn't surprise me. I've seen this before. Right? This is expected. Why aren't you trying to surprise me? Right?
So honestly, it's kind of the way I think about it is actually kind of sad. Fan fiction writers have more leeway to do crazy things, and because they do it usually in chapters of a book that they sometimes book quote unquote that they don't post all at once. They get time to like see the reaction and then figure out a way to make it work. As for TV shows, in the new age of TV shows with episode writers, and even still some of the current ages, where like things are even written well in advance, and so like they don't get a chance to change anything at least for a single season, or for movies where it's all planned out. You get this big idea that for one is way out there, but then you don't get a chance to react to the basically I guess the you don't get to react to the reaction. Now sure with your trailers and all that stuff you can, but still like you can't make huge changes like a fanfic author could. The other thing too is with these like for TV shows and such, people expect you to stay on topic but also be adventurous, and then some certain things that are too adventurous, that's when they come off as like, wow, you're taking a big leap here, better pay off. Whereas fanfics, the whole idea of a fanfic is make your own world style, or take the world that's been made because it's fanfic and throw out some fantastical idea, alternate universe, what if, new person, shitfic, shitpost. It's all just a lot of fanfictions are just make it your own, right? And so
I mean, there's no inherent risk, right?
Exactly.
So do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
The only risk, the only skin you have in the game is your own pride and your own emotional well-being. That people who are, especially if it's something that you actually care about, you're not just posting, and you're not just writing a shit post fan fiction. Essentially, if you're not doing that, the only skin you have in the game is your own pride and your own emotional well-being. The second someone tells you, yeah, this is shit. And if you're writing a shit post fan fiction, well, obviously you have zero skin in the game whatsoever. So go ham. As an actual professional creator who's doing a thing that is going to cost someone somewhere millions of dollars potentially, you have less leeway. Unfortunately, too, and that's an unfortunate thing, right? I think all of us would agree. We'd love to see people take more risks, but unfortunately, it's hard to take risks when you have so much on the line.
Yeah, it's like Disney and stuff. They always have these. Like there was this funny thing. Well, funny maybe it's like with Voltron, for instance. It feels like the fans of Voltron, they expect a lot more. Like that's even possible or probable in terms of LGBT content than any moral guardian would allow. So they go like, oh, everyone should be gay, and there's bi characters and trans characters, and then DreamWorks goes like, yeah, there's no way we can show that because all the Christian groups and the mom groups, they'll all be angry and they'll boycott us. So I think fan fiction is more a room where you can be controversial and you can also be more personal. Like you can just write something that's about you and your struggle, or something that's very important to you, but doesn't have to be important to a big enough audience to make a profit.
Okay. You guys pretty much summed it up. I have nothing. I don't really have anything to add, I think.
You're welcome.
You just made redundant.
Well, so anything else to say before we close the episode? Any closing thoughts on the matter?
Spelling
Aside-
grammar, people. It helps.
Okay, so spell, grammar, and light fury is obviously the best canonical thing they could have thought up. And if you criticize it, you're wrong. That's it. That's all I have to say.
I feel like there was more of a threat that was supposed to be there, but then you just
How
yeah,
was
let's not.
This is HC we're talking
how
about.
was this a
This is
how was
true.
this a threat? No,
So
no,
I
no.
heard you
Explain to me
didn't like the
how was
light.
this a threat?
It
Oh.
sounded like there was supposed to be more to that than, well, you're just wrong. And the
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm not gonna go there. Never mind. You're just wrong.
Well, with all that said, that's all the Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed. What do you think about fanfiction's impact on the canon stuff? Whatever you think, you can tell us all about it on the comment section below. On Tumblr, where we are known as Berkcast Team. On Twitter, where we are Berkcast with capital B, capital C. And you can find all of us on the How to Train Dragon Valhalla Discord server. Wolfie, where can the people find you?
I'm on Tumblr as Wolfie-Dragon-Rider, and I'm also on fanfiction.net, an archive of our own, with my fanfics as Wolfie-Dragon.
Okay. Twig, what about you?
Just a Tumblr and a fanfiction. Tumblr is Twiggy242, and fanfiction would be Twigman242. Very original.
Yeah, and if actually on that note, if you want to find some of my fan fictions for whatever reason, I encourage you not to. But if you still want to, look up HCSP1 on fanfiction.net. So with all that said, I was HC.
I was Rush.
I was Wolf.
I was Wolfie-Dragon.
Twigman.
And we will talk to you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.